A Russian woman from a Moscow ghetto called Esther Lachman hustled her way from the ghetto to the top of society in 19th century Paris, enchanting artists, writers and nobility along the way. From a penniless sex worker, she rose to massive fortune and major political influence, and even espionage. She became the self-styled courtesan known as Paiva, and she set out to conquer Parisian society and pulled it off so grandly that even she was surprised. Paiva, as her contemporaries saw her, was more than just a courtesan, but an archetypal figure of European society at the time. She had a virtue greater than beauty, as she had intelligence, a steely resolve, and a ruthless, manipulative drive that propelled her from poverty to immense wealth and influence, and she didn't mind who she trampled on in her pursuit of power and wealth. Determined and resourceful, she exhibited loyalty to a select few close associates, while exploiting opportunities with others to advance her social standing. She reputedly had a personality so hard-bitten that she was described as the one great courtesan who appears to have had no redeeming features, the Queen of kept women. She was born in Russia in 1819, in the Moscow Jewish quarter, the child of Polish and German Jews, in a land not hospitable to their religion. Economic hardship was compounded by religious and social marginalization. By the time she was 17, she was married to a tailor called Francois Villon, who had tuberculosis, and they had a son called Antoine together. It didn't last, as she had enough and left, without her son, and set off for Paris, Europe's go-to fashionable location, with an iron determination to make it to the top of European society. Her journey took her through Berlin and Vienna for brief stays, where she may have worked as a dancer or artist model to support herself. Arriving in Paris in 1836, the city had no shortage of prostitutes and other sex workers, and it seems 22-year-old Esther lodged in a maison de passe, a cheap hotel where the women clubbed together and men came and went. Determined to get somewhere more exclusive and more upmarket, as well as in order to score a man better than the by-the-hour clients of the red light district. She was resourceful enough to borrow elegant gowns and imitation jewellery to gain entry into fashionable circles. This marked the beginning of her transformation in the French capital. She seamlessly moved into the fringes of respectable society by the early 1840s, establishing herself as an independent courtesan amid the vibrant social scene. She began by renting modest apartments, progressing to more luxurious ones funded by patrons, which allowed her to cultivate an image of accessibility, yet exclusivity, for elite visitors. This resulted in an encounter, among others, with a prominent pianist and composer called Henry Hertz. He was successful and wealthy, and set her up as his mistress with a grand Paris apartment. She was still married to her lawful husband in Moscow, but even so, called herself Madame Hertz. But no one was fooled, least of all the gatekeepers of the court circle of King Louis Philippe, who turned her away. Hertz, a prominent figure in the city's musical scene, provided substantial financial support, including jewellery, real ones this time, fine clothes, and the means to maintain a luxurious lifestyle, while introducing her to elite cultural and artistic circles that included Richard Wagner, Hans von Bülow, and Theopold Gautier, who were all friends of the couple. During their relationship, which lasted approximately 5 years, Hertz facilitated her education in French, music and the arts, as well as etiquette, enabling her to adopt a more sophisticated persona. This relationship gained her entry into artistic, but not aristocratic, society. They had a daughter in 1842, Henrietta, whose custody was entrusted to the Hertz family. She would unfortunately die at the age of 12. Esther's avariceness took a toll on Hertz's finances, and the partnership ended in the mid-1840s, with Hertz's parents disapproving of her extravagant spending and social ambitions. Having squandered her lover's fortune, pressured him into leaving for the United States. While he was abroad, her spending continued. The family, out of frustration, later unceremoniously evicted her from the apartment, leaving her without a source of money. She had also been spending far too much. Hertz had gone to the Americas. Her health was faltering. Her jewels were at the pawn shop. And without Hertz's backing, she was all but destitute and risked falling back into a brothel. One of her friends had a solution and took Esther to a fashionable milliner named Camille, who advised to seek a fortune in London, where she could take advantage of that fairyland of noble strangers. Dressed in borrowed finery, on her first day in the city, at the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden, she was an instant success. She attracted a series of wealthy international clients, including the English aristocrat Edward Stanley, 2nd Baron Stanley of Alderley, who became one of her early conquests and helped introduce her to broader British high society circles. She leveraged her multilingual skills and cosmopolitan allure to secure patronage during her stay in the city, combining exceptional wit and unyielding ambition. On her return to Paris, to add to the complexity of her life, her lawful husband Francois Villon arrived from Moscow, seeking reconciliation with his wife and win her back. It was not enough, and she shunned him, and he would die penniless in Paris in 1849. This meant that Esther was finally a widow. Soon she'd done even better, ensnaring a Portuguese marquis, Albino Araújo, the Marquis de Paiva. The couple had met several years earlier at a spa in Baden-Baden, where her ambitions for social legitimacy, aligned with his resources, enabled a shared opulent lifestyle amid Paris's elite circles. He was the heir to two important Macau wholesale fortunes, each based in part on the opium trade. 2 years after Esther's husband died, now established in Parisian high society, the couple got married in June 1851. This union elevated her status, granting her the self-styled title Marquise de la Paiva, and access to his considerable wealth derived from family fortunes. The following day, the new Marquise de Paiva gave her husband a letter ending the marriage. "You have obtained the object of your desire, and have succeeded in making me your wife," she wrote. "I, on the other hand, have acquired your name, and we can call it quits. I have acted my part honestly and without disguise, and the position I aspired to I have gained. But for you, Monsieur de Paiva, you are saddled with a wife of foulest repute, whom you can introduce to no society, for no one will receive her. Let us part. Go back to your country. I have your name, and will stay where I am." Having got what she wanted from her spendthrift marquis, the letter concluded, "You go back to Portugal. I shall stay here and remain a whore." Now she was that rarest thing, a courtesan with a title, and with it she won a succession of lovers, ever more powerful and ever richer. She retained the Le Paiva name, which became integral to her public persona, leaving his wife with £40,000 in securities that were specified in their marriage contract as well as all the furnishings of their house in Rue Rossini, a dejected Arujo, decamped for Portugal. Following years of separation, the marriage was annulled finally in 1871. Years later, her husband found himself in dire financial straits, with a pile of debts, and he shot himself in November 1872. La Paiva accumulated initial wealth through lavish gifts of jewellery and cash from her various paramours, which she shrewdly used to build financial independence. To advance her social standing, she hosted informal gatherings in her apartment by the mid-1840s, blending artistic and aristocratic guests to forge connections that propelled her ascent in Paris's society. These strategies positioned her as a formidable figure from precarious beginnings to prominence. One of her clients, or conquests, was banker Adolphe Gaffe, of whom she demanded 20 banknotes of 1,000 francs each, which, she stipulated, he must burn one by one during a scheduled 30 minutes of love-making. The banker decided to substitute counterfeit banknotes. Even so, the sight of their incineration was so unnerving that he could not accomplish his part of the tryst. Gaffe, who bet his friends he would be able to access her favours without payment, actually did, because the money was all fake. In July 1856, La Paiva managed to acquire some prime site land at 25 Avenue des Champs-Élysées and built an epic neo-Renaissance style residence that became known as the Hôtel de La Paiva. The project took a decade to complete and was finished in 1866 at a cost of 10 million gold francs. The building's extravagant design, desire for grandeur, incorporating rare materials and artisanal craftsmanship from leading artists including Auguste Rodin. Key features included a monumental yellow onyx staircase, fireplaces inlaid with lapis lazuli and other semi-precious stones, together with exotic woods and marble throughout the interiors. A notable Moorish-inspired bathroom featured a bathtub carved from a single block of white onyx, with a silver-lined interior and multiple taps, one of which was rumoured to dispense champagne. The Hôtel de la Paiva served as both a private residence and a venue for elite literary and artistic gatherings, embodying the era's excess. She was a popular hostess known for her lavish open houses, teas, dinners, and social gatherings, frequented largely by well-known writers such as Gustave Flaubert and Émile Zola, the painter Eugène Delacroix, and composer Richard Wagner. It was a public marker of what La Paiva had accomplished. She had hustled all the way from the Moscow ghetto to the most glamorous street in Europe, and no one was going to forget it. Since 1904, it has operated as the Travellers Club while retaining its historic name. It was not long after her separation from the Marquis de Paiva, while pursuing her independent existence, had several high-profile liaisons that helped her define her career, and her fortunes greatly changed through an affair with one of Europe's richer men. She had become a legend and raised her prices accordingly, settling at last for industrialist Guido Count Henkel von Donnersmarck, 11 years younger than she was and one of the richest men in Europe, whom she had met at a party given by the Prussian consul in Paris. She pursued him across Europe, pretending not to be interested in him, but always managing to be in the same city at the same time and at the same social gatherings. He was smitten, and on meeting her again in Berlin, he offered to make La Paiva his mistress, and declared that, if she agreed, she would share his fortune. La Paiva craved riches more than anything, and was reported to have said, after settling down with the Count, "All my wishes have come to heel, like tame dogs. The Count was born in 1830 into an aristocratic family with extensive mining interests. Donnersmarck, who was a cousin of fellow Prussian Otto von Bismarck, had inherited and expanded his father's enterprises in Silesia, amassing a fortune through coal mines, ironworks, zinc smelting, and later investments in industries like wood pulp and rayon, making him one of Europe's wealthiest men by the 1860s. The union provided Paiva with significant financial security as Donnersmarck showered her with gifts, including a generous annual annuity and the purchase of the Château de Pontchartrain near the city in 1857, which he restored lavishly for her use. Their relationship was marked by mutual devotion, despite the social scandals, culminating in their marriage on October 28, 1871, shortly after Paiva secured an annulment of her previous marriage, which solidified her status among Europe's nobility. The Marquise was now Countess Henkel von Donnersmarck, and she gained access to his vast wealth, enabling a life of unparalleled opulence. Even if she was married and had a title, there were limits to her social integration. The imperial couple, Napoleon III and Eugenie, would never receive her at the Tuileries, and no decent woman would compromise herself to appear at Paiva's. Her husband also commissioned a magnificent country house on his estate, known as Schloss Neudeck. The couple embraced a nomadic yet luxurious lifestyle, frequently travelling between Paris, Silesia, and other European destinations, while acquiring additional properties. Paiva exerted considerable influence over Donnersmarck's personal and possibly business affairs, leveraging her sharp intellect and Parisian connections to guide their social and financial decisions. By the middle of the 19th century, age had eroded Paiva's physical charms, with Count Villecastel noting in 1857 that she is at least 40 years old. She is painted and powdered like an old tightrope walker, and she has slept with everyone. This level of expenditure fueled more scandals, with rumours circulating about funding ties amid growing Franco-Prussian tensions, leading to suspicions of espionage during the war of the early 1870s. Paiva faced intense political suspicions in France due to her marriage to the wealthy Prussian industrialist von Donnersmarck. Her position as a high-profile courtesan with extensive social networks among French elites fueled rumours that she was acting as a Prussian spy, leveraging her connections to gather intelligence for German interests. These accusations were exacerbated by Donnersmarck's prominent German ties and his involvement in Prussian industrial and political circles, making Paiva a symbol of perceived betrayal amid rising anti-German sentiment following France's defeat. It was her husband who negotiated the war reparations that France had to pay, an exorbitant sum of 6 billion francs. In the aftermath of the war, when France had been routed, public hostility toward her intensified, with audiences at the Paris Opera hissing at her presence, reflecting a broader backlash against her foreign origins as a Russian-born Jew. By 1877, amid ongoing suspicions of spying, she and Donnersmarck were declared undesirable by the French authorities and forced to leave Paris permanently. They first relocated briefly to London before settling in Silesia, where they resided at the opulent Schloss Neudeck on Donnersmarck estate, where they hosted extravagant gatherings after departing Paris amid post-Franco-Prussian war tensions. Paiva's exile marked a period of relative isolation from Parisian high society as she managed aspects of their Prussian properties while her health gradually declined due to age and the stresses of displacement. Efforts to return to France were blocked by lingering political animosities, cementing her reputation in the French press as a traitor aligned with Prussian interests during a time of national humiliation. This downfall contrasted sharply with her earlier prominence. Paiva and her last, richest husband lived out the rest of her days in the giant mansion Schloss Neudeck in Silesia, in what today is Poland. The Countess died of pneumonia on the 21st of January 1884, aged 64. Devastated and heartbroken by her death, Donnersmarck refused to bury her body, instead having it embalmed in alcohol to preserve her beauty forever. The body was placed in the attic in a glass case for private viewing, and he cried over the dead courtesan for months. In 1901, Kaiser Wilhelm granted Henkel von Donnersmarck the title of Fürst, the highest rank in German nobility, below the Kaiser himself. You have to wonder if he went upstairs to the attic to tell his preserved wife the news that at least in death she had become a princess. It reportedly remained on display until it was discovered by his second wife, Katharina Schlepsau, who he married in 1887. He died in 1916. On her death, Paiva's substantial wealth included jewels, art and properties, like the Hôtel de Paiva in Paris, was inherited by her husband, who absorbed it into his own vast holdings. His wife's body was moved from the attic to the Donnersmarck family mausoleum. During the German invasion of Poland in 1939, the whole of eastern Upper Silesia was occupied. The 316-year reign of the von Donnersmarck family in Neudeck finally came to an end in 1945, and Paiva's remains were moved to the Polish town of Schwanek and interred at the Pastor's Arse Cemetery. The family land and property were expropriated by the communists, and the Schloss Neudeck was destroyed by arson by the Red Army at the end of the war. The local population completed the destruction by plundering the interior and devastating the exterior. All that was left was ruins, which was neither preserved or rebuilt in the post-war period, and was finally demolished in 1961.